Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout. My name is Tom and today I'm joined by Sam to discuss the day's price reveals. Sam, how are you doing?
No, I'm good. Thanks. How are you?
Very well. Excited about England. We both got our England shirts on.
Ready.
So,
Bit nervous though, mind you.
yeah, depending on when you're watching this, you might be laughing at us for being excited, but we'll see.
Or celebrating with
Or
us. Let's be
celebrating.
positive.
Yeah, so today we've had four price reveals from official FPL themed along the Euro final and the Copa America final. But before we get into those, Sam, you're going to tell us something about something very exciting that's coming from Fantasy Football Scout in the coming weeks.
Yeah, so we've been busy since the beginning of this year working on our app, which has been a long time coming. And I know a lot of our members have been asking for an app for a very, very long time. And the trouble with apps is they don't happen overnight. They take a lot of time and a lot of effort. And so Reese has been really, really busy with me over the last few months getting this ready. And it is looking so nice now. Obviously, it has all the things that you would really like about the members area built in. So the fixture tick is there, it's editable. You can change the weeks, you can change the difficulty depending upon what you think about the teams and the ratings. So if you go in and go, oh, actually, Chelsea have had an incredible start to the season. I think they deserve a higher rating. You can change that within the app and therefore change the way the fixture ticker looks so that it's relevant to what you think and what you're seeing. You can also delete out game weeks if you don't want to look at those because I don't know, later in the season you're planning that free hit. So all the stuff that you can do in the regular members area, you'll be able to do there. You'll be able to do your comparisons in there. You'll be able to excitingly plan for your season in there as well. So you'll have the Plan FPL facility within the app natively, so you won't need to go anywhere else for that. You'll be able to build your teams and you'll be able to build them week by week. So if you'll be able to see it looks like this week, if I make this change, what's it looking like next week? And brilliantly, that will also line up with the points predictions as well. So you'll be able to see this is my team for this week. This is what it looks like for next week. What are my predicted points in all of those game weeks? So that's something that I think will be really handy as you're planning through pre-season and obviously into the main season as well. You'll be able to do your team comparisons in there, everything that you could possibly want. Plus, it has live FPL built in as well.
Amazing. Right, so as I mentioned, we've had four prices today. But first, it would be remiss of me not to go back to yesterday and talk about Spurs with Sam. Obviously, season ticket holder and big fan. So, Sam, what was your immediate reaction to the Spurs prices?
It's a little bit sad not to see Suns come up. I think we were all hoping that on the Spurs release we might see Suns leading the way, but nice to see Madders there. And I think, in some ways the prices for Madison and Kulusevski kind of maybe give us a bit of an insight into where Sun might be priced because obviously we would expect Sonny to be significantly more expensive than both of those two. But for me, the really interesting ones were the defensive picks that you had in there because obviously we had Porro coming in at 5.5 and that we had Udogi slightly cheaper again at 5 and Vicario level with him at 5. Now, for me, that kind of rules Vicario out of the goalkeeper conversation because I think we're going to see some value in the 4.5s. We've already seen that with the likes of Flecken and Areola. And if you can have Vicario for 5 or you can have Udogi for 5, I'd certainly prefer an attacking Spurs defender over the goalkeeper, even with the goalie's potential for save points that we did see last season. But with Spurs, clean sheets are never really on the table. They come at times. And to be fair, at the beginning of last season, we had a lot more clean sheets than we had towards the back end of the season. But really, it's about the attacking potential that those players have. So for me, Udogi at 5 is really interesting. I think it's going to depend on your Haaland strategy, whether you're going to be able to afford to get to Porro. Because if you want to go for Haaland and you want to keep budget for the likes of Palmer or Salah, then the chances are you're not going to be able to afford Porro and it's going to have to be Udogi. But I think both of them are going to start in that Spurs team. You could feasibly save yourself a little bit more. And maybe that also taught us without telling us a little bit about the likes of Van der Ven and Romero, because surely they come in then in that 4.5 category where we're seeing the majority of centre backs go. But we did see attacking threat from both of them. So it feels like Spurs have got players in all of the price points that you would potentially want to invest in. It's just going to be a wait and see, I think, for me, in terms of how pre-season goes and what they look like going into game week 1 as to whether you want to heavily invest in them or not.
Yeah, I'll read those out for the podcast listeners. Madison 7.5 million midfielder, Kulusevski 6.5 million midfielder, Pedro Porro 5.5 million defender, Udogi 5 million defender, and Vicario the £5 million goalkeeper. Yeah, I really like Porro. I kept him towards the end of last season when he finally scored twice and delivered. But yeah, as you say, fitting him in may be quite challenging. How do you sort of compare him to Trent at 7? Because, I mean, Porro's got significantly more goal threat, I would say, and there's a big saving there.
There's a massive saving there. And I think, I was expecting Porro to be 6, to be honest, because of the attacking threat. I think probably it was the lack of clean sheets in that middle part of the season that's held Porro back, because his underlying numbers would have suggested that we were going to have a lot more attacking returns than we did out of him. And the clean sheets just weren't there either. So there was a lot of kind of 2s and 1-pointers in that middle part of the season for him. Had those numbers been a little bit higher at that point, I think we probably would have seen a 6 for him. But it is kind of what it is. I think for me, last season, Trent was a real disappointment. He obviously had parts of the season where he was out injured. Liverpool's lack of clean sheets were a problem. We didn't really see the underlying stats in the way that we have for Trent in the past. He obviously looked better when he played in midfield from an attacking perspective, anyway. But Liverpool did struggle defensively, mostly because they had so many injuries at the back, and it was like constant injury after injury after injury for them. So I actually was really quite excited by the Trent price, the 7 million. It's a significant downgrade on where he was this time last year. And I think it brings him back into the affordable category, particularly if your strategy is going to be no Haaland, then you'll be able to have the likes of Trent. Would I prefer to have Trent over Porro? That's a difficult question with my Spurs goggles, but I genuinely think that Porro's attacking threat is greater than Trent's. I mean, that's what we were seeing last season. I think potentially, though, this season under slot, we might, well, it depends where he uses him, doesn't it? As to whether we see an increase in that attacking threat or not from Trent. So, in one of my drafts that I've been working on, I've got Trent in there because it feels remiss of me not to have him. I always like to try wherever possible in my first drafts of the season to have the most expensive player in each position, because then you can kind of go anywhere from that. But Trent is probably the one that I look at and go, oh, I still need 1 million to make my team work. I could just take him down to Udogi. I could take him down to Porro. I could take him down to Trippier, who we've seen today, and make my team work a little bit better. Be interested to see what Robbo comes in at as well.
Yeah, me and Ed were saying 6.5 in between Van Dijk and Trent would make sense, but yeah. So you've just mentioned Trippier there, so let's move on to him because we got his price today, and he has come in at 6 million, which is a £500,000 drop from last year. He was the top scoring fantasy defender in 2022-23. However, he scored just 111 points last year, and as you can see in the text on screen, if you're watching the video, he produced 10 assists, which was actually the best amongst defenders, but that was only coupled with 6 clean sheets, which probably explains the price drop. Have you, especially with Porro at 5.5, is that a little bit too high, do you think?
I think probably, yeah. I think it's a shame though, because there was that period, wasn't there, in the sort of early to middle part of the season where it was just game after game after game. Like Newcastle wouldn't keep a clean sheet, but Trent again, attacking return, or they keep a clean sheet. And all of his points felt like they came in one big chunk at parts of the season. And I look at it and go, there's so much scope there and there's so much potential. But again, a bit like we were saying about Liverpool, the Newcastle defence was absolutely battered by injuries last season. They were losing players left, right, and centre, and the clean sheets just never really stuck. Then they lost the goalkeeper. And I do wonder actually whether, had Nick Pope stayed fit, and I'm not saying Dubravka had a bad season, because I actually think as an understudy to come in for Nick Pope, he did phenomenally well. But I do think that had Pope been there for the majority of last season, it probably would have been a different conversation in terms of the numbers of clean sheets that Newcastle got. And the same with Trippier, right? He had some injuries last season. His attacking numbers weren't always there. But it was just a frustration because there were a lot of games where Newcastle just threw away and conceded a late goal, or just conceded a goal here or there. And those goals here or there, when you're an expensive defender in the game, are really frustrating, because people look at it and go, well, that's 4 points just completely lost. And if I'm spending 6 million I kind of do want guarantees of clean sheets as well as attacking threat. And, we've not seen a price for an Arsenal defender yet. And I look at where Trent is at 7, and I look at Trippier coming in at 6, and I think I'm surely they're coming in somewhere around those numbers, those Arsenal defenders, when you look at the clean sheets that they had last season, as well as the attacking threat, the likes of Ben White, Saliba, Gabriel, all of them surely take price rises on where they were, I would think. And I just don't think that Trippier can hold a candle to that Arsenal defence. And I think I'd rather try and find the extra money to have to have Trent over Trippier. But equally, I think I'd rather have Porro over Trippier, and I could save myself 0.5 then.
Yeah, for sure. And also, Livramento he's not going to sit on the bench for 38 games, in my opinion. So I do wonder whether this season we might see a bit of a transition. Trippier's not getting any younger, and he'll have done the whole summer with England. So I don't know. I think there might be a chance that Livramento maybe starts the season. And we
It'd be
saw
interesting
he gets
if he
injured.
does.
He's becoming more and more injury prone, isn't he, as well?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, Trippier's always been quite injury prone. He was injury prone when he was at Spurs, and that's never really gone away. And like you say, Livramento is interesting, isn't he? Because he is a fantastic understudy for Trippier, and surely longer term is, unless they go and sign somebody else, is their replacement for Trippier as Trippier becomes less able to play 90 minutes every week. But this season, maybe it's different again because Newcastle don't have European football to contend with. So it's just one match every week. And you would think that Trippier would be able to play one match every week. But maybe you're right. Maybe he's not there for the start of the season because England have gone all the way. You'd expect him to have a break and then go back into training late. And obviously, they're back in training already. If he turns up in 2 weeks' time, we're 2 weeks closer to the start of the season, and maybe you're right, maybe Livramento does get the nod for the opening couple of weeks.
Yeah. So I think we're both agreed we'll have to see a little bit from him to get him ahead of Porro and Trent and potentially the Arsenal defenders as well. So we'll move on to Rodri. He has come in at 6.5 million, sorry. So that is a 1 million increase off the back of 8 goals and 10 assists last year, which, to be honest, those numbers caught me a bit by surprise because it feels like he's a player that we maybe should have considered a bit more, but I've never owned him, and I doubt you have either.
Rodri for me was a real frustration last season. Every time a double game week rolled round, I said, get Rodri as your second City attacker. And both times Jules listened and I didn't do it, and I should have done it. But at that point last season, we had loads of money, so I could afford to have Foden instead. And I just was kind of like, well, if I can have Foden, why would I not have Foden over having Rodri? But actually, the answer both times I had that dilemma was Rodri. I think he has the ability to make magic out of absolutely nothing. And when you're trying to build a team, particularly if you're trying to build a team that's got Haaland in it, you'll want to have, at some point in the season, whether it's to start or not, a second Manchester City attacking asset. And you're not realistically going to be able to afford some of the others. I mean, surely you're not going to be able to build a team that's got Haaland and Foden, or Haaland and KDB, if you also want a Palmer or a Salah or whoever else it is that's in there. So I think Rodri could have some value. We've seen in the Euros competition, there's been value there. He's got this attacking threat and he can return from it. I just kind of wonder whether you'd rather have Rodri than, say, someone like Nkunku, because that's the comparison that you're having to make. Now, Rodri's far less injury prone than Nkunku is, and I guess we're going to have to see how Nkunku pans out. And maybe there's some movement between those two over the course of the season, but I don't know. I quite like the Rodri price, I could see at some point in the season. I think I did own him once last time around, and I could see that happening again this season.
Yeah, there's been a bit of a mixed reaction on him. I've seen Joe saying that he's the most overly priced player ever, but I sort of think I was expecting sort of 6.5, and I think he's a very underrated asset.
Yeah, I do.
But perhaps last season was the time we should have gone for him. But yeah, as it says on the screen, if you watch on the video, he played 34 of the 35 games he was available for. So that's what you're getting with that price, as opposed to a Foden who potentially is benched a bit more.
Yeah, he's very consistent, isn't he, in terms of starts? So you do have that as an option. If he's your sort of fourth, fifth midfielder, maybe there's some value there.
Yeah, for sure. And it could be quite similar with Rice as well. Sort of similar mold of player, but seemed to be getting more and more attacking as the season went on. So yeah, his price will be interesting. Yeah, we'll move on to Luis Diaz next, who has come in. He's come in at 7.5 million, which is the same as Gakpo, Nunez. So they're all sort of around that bracket. So again, it's a wait and see to see who gets the nod alongside Salah, you would assume, under the new manager.
Yeah, I think pre-season's going to be quite interesting, isn't it? Because how much are we going to learn about Liverpool? Because obviously they're still away. Like Luis Diaz, the reason he's been announced today is because he's away for the Copa America final. So he's not going to be back in pre-season, you would expect, for at least another couple of weeks. Therefore, no time really to get to know the manager. Gakpo, again, only just gone out of the Euros. You'd expect him to have a break before he goes back and joins up with the manager. So I'm kind of interested to see what Slot does with this attacking unit that he's got. I mean, maybe there's some country loyalties there with Gakpo in terms of, understanding how he plays a bit more. Can anybody ever really get the best out of Nunez? We'll see. I mean, they certainly can on international duty. He's phenomenal when he plays for his country. It's a bit like Richarlison. Like you kind of seem to unlock a different beast when they go away with their countries. I like the Luis Diaz price. I think he is an absolutely talented player, and it was a player that I really wanted Spurs to sign a couple of seasons ago when he went to Liverpool, and I was a bit disappointed that we didn't get him. And he's obviously going to compete with, as you say, with Gakpo, and with Nunez, although they're both forwards. So it depends on how your
Jota
system
as
is
well.
going to work. Yeah, and you've got Jota there as well, but you've also got other players from the other teams that we've had announced already. So you've got kind of that Gordon, Madison, Bowen. There's quite a lot of really nice options in that £7.5 million bracket. And I do think 7.5 million is going to be quite an important point to pick in the early part of the season, because it feels to me like you're going to have an expensive midfielder, Salah, if you're not going for Haaland, or Palmer if you are going for Haaland. And then you're probably going to try and get somebody that sits in also that sort of 10 to 9 million bracket, and then somebody in the 7.5 to 8 bracket, and then two cheaper options behind them, maybe 6.5 and 5.5. Luis Diaz, I don't think is going to be somebody that many people will start the season with, because of the late return to Liverpool and because of wanting to understand what slots Liverpool are going to look like and who's going to get the nod in that front three. But if once he comes back from Copa America and he beds into the Liverpool team in sort of game week 2, game week 3, game week 4, we see him regularly getting those starts. I can see people moving on him because he'll be a cheaper way to invest in the Liverpool attack if you can't afford to have Salah.
Yeah, for sure. I think he needs to improve his output a little bit, to sort of, because he's competing with Bowen, who got 16 goals. He only got 8 in a similar number of starts. Even Rodri got more attacking returns in a very similar number of starts. So yeah, last season he got 32 starts, 8 goals and 7 assists,
Hmm.
which I mean, he's got the capacity to improve, obviously, but I think I'd have to see a little bit more output from him. But they've got the fixtures early on to do it. They've only got one of the big 6 sides in the first 7, and that's Man United. So,
I just
that's
worry that you probably aren't going to have him for game week 1, are you? And
no,
game week 1 fixture, you want
yeah,
investment at
Ipswich, yeah,
Liverpool for that.
yeah. So probably a wait and watch on him. And the final price we got today was Enzo Fernandez, who Luis Diaz is playing in the Copa America final. So I hope he brings it home for Chelsea. But yeah, this is probably, we don't need to spend too much time on Enzo, but he's the same price as last year at 5, and he's coming off the back of 3 goals and 3 assists. And I mean, under the new manager, it obviously remains to be seen where he's going to fit in, whether it's sort of in the 6th role, although you suspect that will be Caicedo. So I think for him, the position is one of the 2 8s. But we've got Palmer, who the Athletic is saying is going to be an 8. We've got Dewsbury Hall, who we just signed. Gallagher, who's still on our books. Lavia to fit in somewhere.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of uncertainty. And as you said about Diaz, he's not back yet. He's hasn't had his holiday yet. He's still playing international football. So it's going to be hard push to see him for game week 1, I would have thought.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, we've not had many 5 million midfielders so far. We've got 5 of them announced so far. Obviously, Lewis Cook at Bournemouth, Enzo Fernandez, who we got today, Adam Wharton from Crystal Palace, and then Morsey from Ipswich. There are four so far. It does feel to me like you're going to probably have one of them. There will be others, of course, across the other teams that we haven't seen get announced yet, but it does feel like you probably are going to end up with a 5 million midfielder. I'm not sure that Enzo Fernandez would be the one that I would plump for, to be honest. The Chelsea fixtures are quite mixed to start the season. There's some really good ones in there, and then there's some really difficult ones in there, like the opening day of the season.
Yeah.
Um, and I just think that there might be better options from some of the other clubs in that really cheap budget price point. I think if you've got that 1.5 more, then of course you go for Nkunku all day long over you going for Enzo. But it's nice to have some 5 million midfielders. I'm just not sure that Enzo is the one that I'd want to invest in.
Yeah, I don't think it's an outrageous shout to say he could offer more than his 3 goals and 3 assists if he's playing as an 8, getting forward a bit more, as opposed to last year when he was alongside Caicedo. But yeah, I mean, he's unlikely he'll be there for the start of the season anyway. You would have thought up to speed properly.
Agreed.
So yeah, so those are the 4 reveals today. I'll just go through them again. We've had Trippier at 6 million defender, Rodri 6.5 million midfielder, Luis Diaz 7.5 million midfielder, and Enzo Fernandez as a 5 million midfielder. So we'll just end the video by I'll bring up the fixture ticker on screen and sort of your overall reaction to the prices. Have you locked? I mean, the game hasn't actually launched yet, but have you locked anyone in?
Do you know, Tom, I've got so many drafts in my head. Basically, as the days have gone on, I've kind of like we were laughing at Chris, weren't we, on when did this start? Thursday? We were laughing at Chris about having everyone in his team. And then so I've been kind of plotting teams, leaving out key players. So there's kind of one draft I'm building that's like got no Haaland. And there's one draft I'm building that's got no Salah. And then there's another draft I'm building that's got no Palmer because they're the most expensive players that we've seen so far. And all of them you could make a case for. Like there's decent options in all three of those teams. And I think there are certain players that I really like game weeks 1 to 7. That's where I'm kind of looking at the moment because ideally I don't want a wild card until at least we get to that point. Liverpool right up there at the top of the fixture, which means for me, I think Salah has to be there. He's had a full pre-season, obviously no international fixtures with Egypt this summer because they played the African Cup of Nations back in January. So a nice rested Salah who's had plenty of opportunity and time to get to know his new manager. And he's really going to be the only one of Liverpool's attacking assets that's had that time because, as we've mentioned already during this video, Gakpo, Darwin, they've all been away. Luis Diaz, they've all been away on international duty. That's gone on for a long time. So Slot hasn't really had the opportunity to meet those players yet. So for me, Salah feels like a bit of a lock. I'm going to try and lock Trent or at least some form of Liverpool defender in there as well, because I think when you look at that opening run of fixtures that they've got, there should be clean sheets in there. There's Ipswich, Brentford, Manchester United, then Forest, Bournemouth, Wolves and Palace. There should be some clean sheets in those opening few weeks. And so I would like a defender from there. Palmer, I can't see me starting without either because that Chelsea, I mean, they're third on the fixture ticker when you run it through to game week 7. And yeah, as I mentioned, it's mixed because you start the season with Manchester City. And I'm not sure that I see that many clean sheets for Chelsea in there. But with Cole Palmer, anything is possible. The big issue I have is there's no break. It's kind of what he's going to have the final tonight. Then he's going to have a couple of weeks off, presumably. But if England win, then you'd expect there to be some follow up with England after that, some sort of trophy parade, I would expect, some celebrations, then a bit of a break, and then back into pre-season. Now, I would expect with how important Palmer was last season that he still starts in game week 1, but I think it's just something to be mindful of. But then there are others that I kind of like. I do think I can see myself going for. I think Davis is a lock at 4.5. I think he feels like an absolute no-brainer. Could be the Lundstrom of this season, I think. Um, the others, it's difficult. I really want Watkins. I think Aston Villa's fixtures are really nice with the exception of Arsenal in game week 2.
You
It's
haven't
West Ham,
mentioned Haaland yet.
Leicester. I don't know what to do about Haaland, to be honest, Tom. I'm really struggling. I think with Haaland, it's going to depend on Foden. if Foden's price comes back, and it's difficult to say that because obviously Haaland has had a really nice break this summer as well. Obviously, Norway didn't qualify for the Euros, so in the same way that Salah's had a nice break and time and is back in pre-season already, Haaland's the same. But I don't think I'm gonna. It's really hard. How do you afford to have Haaland and Salah? Well, you do it by not having Palmer. Is the only way to do it. And the issue I have then is if you start the season with Haaland and Salah, when do you sell them? Because Salah doesn't look like he's getting sold at all before game week 7. And Haaland, realistically, I mean, Chelsea in game week 1, but we spoke, didn't we, on a stream before about how he was good against Chelsea last season.
Yeah,
So,
he got a brace at Stamford Bridge last year. On that, Joe was saying on the video I did with him a couple of days ago that he likes Haaland for 2 weeks and then sell him to Watkins in game week 3 when Watkins has Leicester. So, and it gives you that Ipswich at home captaincy, which, to be honest, I can't see myself missing out on that. Because look, if he scores a brace at Stamford Bridge like he did last year and you're going into Ipswich at home, I'm not convinced I want to be in that position. So I think for me it's easier to start with him, and then obviously you've got any player in the game as and when you want to move. But yeah, I definitely want Salah for game week 1. I want Haaland for game week 2. So I think that will be where I land, and it may well be that Palmer doesn't make it, unfortunately. I'm hoping that Nkunku gives us an excuse in pre-season to save the 4 million there. So that's what, fingers crossed.
I think the thing is, this game this season is going to be a very different beast to the games we've experienced in recent years. In the past, you've been able to build the threemium quite easily and have the 3 most expensive players in the game. Like, you've been able to have Haaland and Kane and Salah, and it was never really an issue because the way the game was priced, there was plenty of options elsewhere, and you had a lot of 8 million really good options, the likes of Saka and although Son was never really that low, but you often had players like Saka and Foden in at that 8 million bracket. What we're seeing with the pricing so far this time is that it feels like we are being restricted in terms of that threemium. You can have them, but then you can't have anybody else. It's everybody else is going to have to be from the bottom basement,
And then there's
that's
Trent
fine.
as well.
And then there's Trent as well, and you can't.
And the Arsenal defenders are not going to be cheap. It's yeah.
No, exactly. And so it feels to me like they are taking the option of that third really expensive player away and saying you can have 2, and then you can have an Arsenal defender. Well, let's see, unless they go mad with their pricing, but you can have an Arsenal defender, or you can have a Porro, or you can have a Trent, but you can't have the 3 most expensive players in the game because it's going to destroy your balance across your squad. So maybe the right option is to start with Haaland and Salah because they've both had pre-season off. They've had a nice break. They've had no European football with their countries, or American, Copa America with their countries, and they have now the opportunity to get back in and be the ones to start the season. Even with Foden, like, we've seen plenty of rotation for Foden under Pep for years and years and years. Do we really think he's going to start Foden in game week 1, having not been there for most of pre-season? Who knows? I guess it depends off the rumours of KDB might be off ski are accurate, but it's always interesting coming out of a summer of international football because you never really know who's going to get those starts. But what we do know is that Haaland and Salah feel quite important for their teams in this early part of the season. So maybe the right answer is you start with both and then you lose one of them. And the one you would lose probably does feel like it might be Haaland because after that is West Ham, Brentford, Arsenal, Newcastle. Whereas, as you say, Watkins has that really nice run of Leicester, Everton, Wolves and Ipswich. So maybe you do a little swap there. And of course, that gives you 2 weeks extra for Watkins to recover from being away with England and then get back ready to go again with Aston Villa.
Yeah, and you missed the Arsenal game for Villa as well. But yeah, as I said, I think Nkunku, if he can match Palmer or there or thereabouts for 4 million less, I think.
Can he match him?
I think he can. I think he could if he stays fit. We'll have to
see. Yeah.
If he could be playing up front, he could be off the left. But yeah, we'll have to see in pre-season. But yeah, I'm waiting for an excuse to get Nkunku to hopefully afford Haaland.
You don't need any excuse.
No, I won't. A couple of pre-season goals and I'll be straight there.
Love
for the
that.
balloon celebration as well. Um, right,
You don't
yes.
fancy a bit of a camera from Sonny?
Nah,
We have to see what he's priced at.
yeah. Prediction on Son? What was he last year? 10.5?
No, he started at nine and a
Started
half,
nine and a
didn't
half,
he? Massive drop,
and he
3
got
million
over
drop.
200 points.
Yeah, so the season before he was what, 12 and a half, dropped to 9.5, got over 200 points in a season where actually Spurs didn't do particularly well and he was a bit off it. He's got to go up.
I would really like it if Saka, Palmer, and Son were all 10.5. I think that'd be good. Would make
All
people
10
think.
and a half.
Yeah, I would enjoy that. Make people think big time.
It definitely would make people think. I think he'll be at least 10. He's got to be, surely. I think all three of them that you've just mentioned probably will be. It makes sense because of the way they're pricing the rest of the game. If Palmer's 10.5, penalty takers as well, Son and Saka, so is Palmer. Would it make sense for them all to be the same? Maybe it does. Would it make sense for Son to rise by 1 million?
Got over 200 points. Pretty
Probably.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have
Could
to
see it.
Yeah. And then, of course, you got Richarlison at 7, who, you know,
Yeah, and if you want a midfielder, you can go 7.5 and go for Maddison.
yeah. So,
Hmm.
yeah, it's going to be which of those premiums probably has the best performing, lower level option. You could be Maddison and Kunku. Havertz is 8, I think. So,
Yeah.
there's going to be cheaper options for every premium. Foden to Haaland, Diaz to Salah, so yeah, plenty up in the air. Right, so we'll end the video here and the podcast. We'll just finish off with a reminder on the 40% discount on the Fantasy Football Scout Premium. The pre-season is fast approaching. The tournaments are almost done. Hopefully it ends up in the right way tonight, but we'll see. And we'll have everything you need for a successful pre-season and to build your first draft. We've got the minutes trackers for all pre-season friendlies, who's getting the goals, who's getting the assists, which cheap players are playing. And then, of course, the app that Sam mentioned. To get the most out of that, you will need a Fantasy Football Scout Premium membership. Link is in the description below, and it's currently 40% off, and it won't be cheaper throughout pre-season. So, Sam, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. We'll be back tomorrow, I think, if there's more price reveals. So, looking forward to that. And yeah, if you're listening on the podcast, do turn on your downloads, 5-star review if you enjoyed it, and if you're watching the video, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much, Sam.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Goodbye from me.